a disaster. The mermaid is now on the run. Her children are off causing damage elsewhere. Just a bit of messiness, and he's like this tattooed bodyguard who, like, you know, he doesn't do relationships, and it's just like, okay. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra the TBR0, and today I'm going to be talking about my May reads because as of recording, it is June 1st. Before we get started though, I just want to remind you to consider subscribing, liking the video, and ringing that little bell so that every time another video like this pops up on my channel, you'll be one of the first notified. For May, I ended up reading 9 books, but for full transparency, 5 of those books were audiobooks that I got through Hoopla or Libby. I really hate making anyone feel poorly about themselves if they feel that there's a certain standard for avid reading, that they need to read, say, 5 books a month, 10 books a month. That is not the case, especially when most of us have regular jobs. I work multiple jobs. I have other projects that I am involved in. And so just to kind of keep up this ideal of, oh, I read all the time, I'm this avid reader, and it's a bit unrealistic. And so that's why I'm letting everyone know that 5 of the books were audiobooks, 1 of them was an ebook, and then I think only 3 out of the 9 were like physical books. With that said, I didn't read any books on my physical TBR, which I honestly felt. I certainly don't regret it because all of the books I did read were either from the library or they were gifted copies from the publisher, which I'm so grateful for as always. So certainly no regrets, but it was really fascinating for me to, especially at the end of the month, feel the fact that I hadn't read any physical books and kind of mourning that. So I think in June, one of my goals will be to actually read more physical books that I own. Not because I feel like it's an obligation, especially because my name is Leandra the TBR0, but just because I really want to. I want to get through the books that I own, and I'm really excited about them. So I ended up starting off my month with The Wedding Season by Katie Birchall. I read this as a buddy read with Carly from Bookish Pixie Reads. A little while ago, we realized that we both had read The Secret Bridesmaid by the same author, and we both loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It was actually the last book I read back in December 2022, so the last book of the year. Ended on a brilliant note. And so when we realized that The Wedding Season was out and we both really wanted to read it, we're like, let's just do it together. And so we read it together, and it was such a great experience. My favorite part was actually talking with Carly about it at the end and comparing notes, comparing thoughts about certain characters. And yes, by the name, The Wedding Season, it is kind of this quasi wedding related series, but Katie Birchall doesn't declare it a series. The Secret Bridesmaid and The Wedding Season are both viewed as standalones. None of the characters overlap either. It's just this theme surrounding weddings and matrimony and all of that jazz. So with The Wedding Season though, we have Freya, and she's really fascinating because she is actually, we opened the novel with her the day before her wedding. She's really excited. The plans are getting all together. We've got, you know, the caterers, we've got friends getting dressed and just getting everything prepared. And then at one point, Freya's fiance arrives on the scene. He pulls her aside and says he can no longer do this. He's not ready for marriage. He doesn't want to do this anymore. He's been lying to himself, to everyone else, and this wedding can't happen. And so basically Freya's entire world just crashes down, especially because they've been together for more than 10 years. Their entire 20s, both of these characters had been in a relationship. It was really her only main huge relationship, I think, in her life, if I remember correctly. They met in college, and so that just her entire 20s is wrapped around her memories with him. And so that's just such a heartbreaking, crazy experience that I can't imagine someone going through that. And his reason was that he felt that maybe they wasted their 20s, that he wasn't able to date around and just meet other people and learn more about himself, which is kind of insulting, especially because it makes her question herself, because she didn't feel like she had wasted her 20s. So what does that mean about her own standards, about what she thinks is good enough, what's good enough for her? And I really liked how throughout the process, even though this is genuinely a romance, I promise it's a contemporary romance, but one of the biggest, I guess, hurdles that Freya has to go through is her reevaluating her relationship, re-looking at old memories and kind of looking at them from a different perspective and realizing maybe life wasn't as perfect as she thought it was. And she doesn't just fault Matthew, who is her ex-fiance at this point. She kind of faults herself too. And I thought that was a really healthy way of showing someone coping with a relationship that has ended, especially one that's ended so poorly. On that note, someone who ends a relationship the day before their wedding, all I could think about was the money. I was like, all of those deposits are gone. So much money has been wasted. And not just on the couple, but in regards to bridesmaids and groomsmen, families, those who were traveling for the wedding. Like, so many people have probably spent money on this excursion, on this event, and I was like, this is a disaster. Once this huge event happens and Freya is trying to cope with what's going on, she kind of reflects on the fact that this is an entire wedding season, that her wedding was actually kicking off the season, and she had about, I think it was like 7 more weddings to attend throughout the summer, and she's dreading them because she can't just hole up and not show up anywhere, because these are people's weddings that she actually wants to support, which I really loved that perspective as well, that she was like, I don't want to miss out on these important events for my friends and family because I care about them and I want to be there, but I also don't want to take away from them because I'm mourning something myself and I'm a bit embarrassed as well. So her and her closest friends end up kind of creating these challenges for her at every wedding. She has to do something. She's got to accomplish a certain task, and that is a great way to distract her. It's a great way to challenge her, have her get outside of her comfort zone, especially because another thing that Matthew, her ex-fiance, said was that she's just so predictable. She's so in control of her life and in herself that she's almost, pretty much he calls her boring, which is the biggest insult. And I just, oh my gosh, I hate Matthew so much. If you read this book, you will also hate him progressively more and more, because he keeps doing things that you're just like, who are you? Why was she with you for so long? So anyway, I'm totally in Freya's corner, and I hate Matthew is basically all you need to know. But throughout this, the romance part is so lovely because she ends up meeting this guy, Jamie, at one of the weddings, and they do not hit it off. They actually are opposites completely, and it starts off as kind of like enemies to lovers. And I kind of liked that, especially because usually with contemporary romances, enemies to lovers is actually just so overdone. In real life, we don't have enemies. That's not a real thing. There's nothing that's that on the line for our lives that we have a genuine enemy. So it kind of fizzles out really quickly in just becoming opposite tracks, friends to lovers. They become friends as they're both attending these various wedding events, like maybe a bachelor and bachelorette party and all these other things. And so then they kind of become friends because they're both single, they're both kind of supporting each other, but they're both very much different. And their dialogue is just so refreshing. It's so funny. At one point, Jamie makes fun of her because she says, oh, I kind of view you as a floozy, because he's late all the time. And she's like, oh, because you don't really care. You're like, just walking through life. And he's like, that's not what a floozy is, because he's so baffled that she pretty much called him promiscuous. And it's the funniest thing. So I really loved that. The only thing I think I would have liked is a bit more emphasis on Freya learning how to be single. I think that it's too often, especially in the romance genre, that these characters are going from one romantic relationship to another, and I just don't think that's healthy. I think that that is showing a bit too much codependence and just general dependence on someone feeling they need to be in a relationship all the time for them to feel like their life is complete. And I just don't think that that's the greatest mindset. And while she is single for a few months, I would have liked there to be some type of like distance, and maybe like 6 months from now she then kind of meets Jamie again and she's her own person, and I would have liked that better. But it honestly was a lovely book, and I think that the way it was designed was really well, and I think Freya really gets this great closure event with her ex-fiance that is just icing on the cake, on the wedding cake, if we want to say that. So I gave it 5 stars, of course. I think I'm just gonna like everything that Katie Birchall writes. I hope she continues with this series that's not a series, because I also really like how she uses this backdrop of weddings for characters to kind of get through what they need to get through. The next book that I ended up finishing was Hooked by Emily McIntyre. I ended up reading this for a read-along with Brooklyn Reads over at her channel and a few others, and it was really fun. I thought that I had never read a dark romance before, and then recently I had this flashback where I remembered that I had actually read a mafia romance, which I guess that is under the umbrella of dark romances. It was like the Cora Riley series, if anyone remembers those. And I was like, oh, I guess I did. But I will say that Hooked is far more visceral. There's far more descriptions of violence. Hook, who's the main character, he is just definitely not even a great character. He is such a dark character, and he really enjoys anything that has to do with violence. He's great with a knife, whatever. It's also a retelling of sorts of Peter Pan, where Hook ends up getting into this relationship with Wendy, and her father is actually Peter, and he's also not a great guy, and there's like this dark past where Peter basically has killed Hook's family, and so Hook wants revenge, and he sees that the only way he can get revenge, in addition to eventually killing Peter, which is his goal, is to also get through to him through his daughter. And it's really dark. It's really fascinating. I thought it was really fun, specifically to be able to talk with other people about this book, but I don't really know if it was necessarily for me, especially the ending. There was a lot of twists that I think everyone collectively agreed was just too dramatic. I can't say any of them because it would be massive spoilers, but it just like was one thing after the other, and I was like, what is going on? Like, nobody's who they says they are. Everything's just massively crazy. And then there's this really strange, the reason why it's strange, I'm talking about the epilogue, is that it's strangely sweet. It's from Hook's perspective, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't really know why the author decided to include that in there. But with that said, everyone had a lot of fun, and I think we're continuing the read along. Now we're going to be reading Scarred. I'm on the waiting list for it, so I probably will be behind the group. But I know that Brooklyn is actually going to be doing sprints on her channel this Friday, so if this ends up being uploaded in time, you'll all know about it. If not, sorry. Editing has its own schedule, and I definitely don't prioritize it when I need to. But yeah, so it was a fine book. I think I enjoyed it more mainly because I was able to talk about it with other people, so I gave it 3 stars. And if I remember correctly, Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading, she also gave it 3 stars, and we're usually pretty on par for what we think about, especially when it comes to romances. So yeah, well, we'll see how it goes. I've heard that Scarred is really fun, so I'm definitely gonna give it a shot, and I'm gonna listen to that on audiobook just like I did with Hooked. Next, I don't even know if I'm doing this in the right order, to be honest. I'm just looking down the list. I don't think I read these in that order, but it's fine. Next, I'm going to talk about Barbarian's Prize and Barbarian's Mate. So this is part of the Ice Planet Barbarians series. It's by Ruby Dixon. They are books 5 and 6. We are doing this really fun, every other month kind of reading sprints situation. Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading and myself, where we read for 4 hours on her channel, 4 hours for mine, and usually we get through about 2 books every session, and it's been so fun. Our next one is scheduled already. I'll put the dates here because I already can't remember when it is. I think it's the 15th of July. We'll be starting on book 7. If it helps, it's the 7th month, so we're starting on book 7. It actually was not intentional, but it works out really well for remembering. If you're interested, feel free to join us. You can start on book 1. You can read anything else that you want if you just want to enjoy the ride of us kind of feeling like this series is crazy but fun at the same time, then you're welcome to join. So for Barbarian's Prize, I ended up giving it 4 stars. I really liked it. I think that I remember the only critique I had was sometimes with the plotting. There was this really weird long scene of like, it was a bit of a competition. It made me think of like a very off-brand, like off-market Olympics in a sense. It was a really weird scene, and I was kind of like, what is the point of any of this? Like, it seemed a bit silly to me. But the couple was really cute in it. Tiffany and Saluk, I really enjoyed them a lot, and they kind of reminded me a bit of, who did they remind me of? They kind of reminded me of, I believe maybe Kira and her love interest, because they also had this dynamic where the woman was feeling insecure. She was a bit upset with her situation, you know, because each of them have something going on. And then we've got this masculine alien figure saying, no, I feel certain about us. I'm okay with us taking our time because I know that it's going to be worth it, that you're going to understand that we belong together just as much as I do, which is really great. I really like when there's a supportive male character. On the flip side, the one poor thing that happened, which again, it's not this book's fault, but it kind of set up high expectations for book 6, because book 5 was actually the book out of all of them so far that has given us the most information about the next couple. We are getting multiple scenes with them, and that couple is Hayden and what is her name? I don't know. Josie. That just shows also, I'm gonna be completely clear, I gave this book 2 stars, book 6. But so in book 5, Hayden and Josie, we get this kind of enemies to lovers, maybe even like grumpy sunshine, which is what Brittany said, and I totally I was totally on board for that, this idea of Grumpy Sunshine, where Josie would be the sunshine, Hayden would be the grump, and it would actually be the reverse of what Tiffany and Saluk are, or Kira and Ihako are, where it's Josie who's being supportive. Josie's the one who's saying, I know that this is meant to be, I'm going to be patient, I'm going to support you, because Hayden has some kind of things in his past that are making him it's really difficult for him to feel any type of dedication to a relationship and feel that it's actually going to continue on in his favor, because he's kind of been burned in the past. But it didn't happen that way. Josie goes off the rails. She is very much not the sunshine that she was in book 5. So in book 6, she's like, this love isn't meant to be, I'm being tortured, this is horrible. And Hayden, meanwhile, is like, no, we're meant to be, but like he's kind of grudgingly doing it. And it's a wild ride. I think that unfortunately for this couple, it was actually more of a setup for book 7 and 8, because there's a certain event that happens where it only could have happened if at one point Josie runs off on her own and then discovers this thing, and like it just kind of turns the entire series on its head, and it kind of allows us for what's going to happen in book 7 and 8. And I'm disappointed that these two characters didn't get the book that they should have gotten, because I would have been totally for it, and I think it probably would have been one of my favorites with this couple dynamic if the characters stayed true to who they were in book 5, and it didn't do it. It was more of a kind of bridging book, which is just really unfortunate for those characters. So I ended up giving it 2 stars, but I have high hopes for book 7 and 8. Next, I'm going to be talking about The Salt Grows Heavy. This is actually a horror novella, fairy tale retelling, focusing on kind of like mermaid legends, especially because we have like The Little Mermaid, which is very Disney, very sugary, and this book is very much not that. It's really fascinating. The main character, the mermaid, who I believe just stays unnamed, she and this plague doctor open the novel basically just observing ruin. The entire kingdom, the king that took her from the sea and forced her to have his children, has been burned to the ground. It is devastation, because the children that she bore, these daughters, ended up just devouring the kingdom, literally devouring it with their sharp teeth and just no mercy at all. And so in these ruins, the mermaid is now on the run. Her children are off causing damage elsewhere. And so the only other person who has survived this is the plague doctor. And so they join her. They're this androgynous character, which I really enjoyed. They go off, and the novella is kind of broken up into nights, like if they've survived night 1, then night 2, and I really enjoyed that perspective. And they're traveling the countryside trying to get to the next kingdom, and it's this really dark fairy tale, atmospheric, gothic. It was great. Like, I really did have a lot of fun with just the eeriness, and it really made you rethink who monsters are, because we have this mermaid, this woman character who's a monster, and then we have this androgynous, non-binary character who's the plague doctor, who also has their own past and is deemed a monster in certain circles. And that's just so typical in traditional horror, that these two characters who are in this book are main characters who we're rooting for would be demonized, would be viewed as these monstrous things that need to be slain, and instead we're rooting for them because in reality in this world they're actually the least monstrous. The other people, typically men in power, are the ones who are doing these horrific acts to them and to others. And yeah, it was really fascinating. The one thing I was really sad about, there's this other side character that I thought was going to have a more positive arc. Just ends up kind of being thrown away, and it was really sad. I want to let you all know that there's massive gore in it. I don't think it's sensationalized. I don't think it's overly done. It just makes sense for the world, but there is a lot of gore, and there isn't necessarily a super happy ending. I will say that there's the happiest ending that I guess could happen, but yeah, it was a bit sad, but also really thoughtful. Like, I liked it. Apparently this book also is based off of a short story that the author, who I didn't even say their name, Cassandra Kaw, so they originally published a short story, and then I think it was transformed into this novella, which is just really cool. I find that really fascinating when authors end up deciding that there is more to a story, and so they expand it and give us like a novel or something else instead. That was done by Karen Russell with Swamplandia. That started off as a short story, and then she eventually transformed that into a novel, and I believe it was a finalist for the Pulitzer. I actually didn't really like it very much. I like the short story better, but that's another story for a different day. So yeah, I ended up giving The Salt Grows Heavy 4 stars. Did I ever say the title? I hope I did. The Salt Grows Heavy. I gave it 4 stars, and I thought it was really interesting. It reminded me of A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, another book that kind of reevaluates fairy tales that, or even just classic stories, because that's a retelling of Dracula from a feminist perspective. That's what I would argue The Salt Grows Heavy is like. Both of those books are very much from a feminist modern day perspective, and I really appreciated it. With that said, what I thought was interesting is Amy from BookTube with Amy. She tried this author, Cassandra Khaw, and didn't really like the book that she read by them. And I was kind of sad because I thought of Amy when I was reading this. I was like, oh, I think that she'd like this. And so maybe it's just that book versus this book. But I found this fascinating, and I certainly didn't regret reading it, even as I'm trying to figure out what I like, what kind of horror I like, because that's certainly still a really new genre for me. Oh my gosh, I had to start recording again. And now I don't even know where I was, but I think I was talking about The Salt Grows Heavy. On that note, I am going to be reading Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. This is going to be a buddy read in June, and I'm really excited about it, and it was inspired by the fact that I was talking about The Salt Grows Heavy with Danny from Danny Dabbles. She has that book on her waiting list, and so while we were chatting, we both are really interested in reading more horror in 2023. We were throwing titles back and forth at each other, and we landed on this one, and this is on her list as well, so we thought we should just read it together in June, which I'm really excited about. And what's even more interesting is that within the next day or two of us planning this, I saw that a book 2 is coming out. So this is going to be a horror series. Book 2 is coming out in 2024 already. They're talking about that, which is really fascinating and crazy that we're halfway through 2023 and we already are anticipating books for 2024. But anyway, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Danny, if you're watching, I'm going to start it today. And I really hope that you and I have a lot of fun with it because it just sounds so good. It's like a ghost ship and it's in space. And I don't think I've ever read sci-fi horror before. So we'll see if that's kind of a niche that I'm into. I also read One Girl in All the World. This is by Kendara Blake. It's the second book in the In Every Generation series. That is the first book in the series, the title of it. And I really love this series. It's a YA paranormal, Buffy 2.0 kind of reimagining. It follows Frankie Rosenberg, and she is an eco-witch turned slayer. In the first book, she develops these slayer abilities, and it's really confusing. Book 1 is basically her just kind of getting her bearings in her new reality, and it's triggered by this event at a Slayer convention where there's an explosion, and they're really not sure how many, if any, Slayers survived. They don't know if Buffy survived, and it's just utter chaos. Meanwhile, the entire world of demons saw this event, and now they think it's a free-for-all, and all of them are flocking to Sunnydale, and it's basically just Frankie and her Scooby gang of friends trying to protect people of Sunnydale, protect the world from those who are trying to get close to the hell mouth that has been closed during Buffy's time. So it's just such fun. It's utter fun. In book 2, we are getting a bit more into the mystery behind the attack on the Slayers, who's behind it, why the attack happened, what the motivation was, and what the next steps are. It's really fascinating. We're also learning more about each character's backstory, the things that they're struggling with, the pressures that they have outside of their slaying duties, and how there's beginning to be cracks in this strong Scooby gang. And I'm not saying cracks in regards to conflicts between characters where they're not trusting each other, or they're fighting and that. It's just insecurities, it's emotional, mental, and physical capacities are being maxed out, and there's just this huge stress, especially because a major event happens where suddenly all of these demons, beyond the fact that they think all the Slayers are gone, but they're really they're acting abnormally, they're maybe hurting when they shouldn't be, they're returning to Sunnydale when there's no reason why they should be, and the town's just getting overrun, and it's none of the characters really understand why it's happening, but they're really being tested in regards to their stamina, and Frankie is at her wit's end, and I really found that fascinating, the fact that it focuses on that. With that said, the characters are always supporting each other. They always put each other first and the group first, which I really appreciate. I also like how smart the characters are. There are certain twists that I could see in other books published in the past where the characters would just be completely blinded by it, or it would cause a huge rift in the group if something was discovered, and there'd be no way of them being able to mend things or find trust again. But these characters have such good open communication, and I really like that. It's really refreshing to see a character anticipate something that's going to happen because it's obvious that it's going to happen. Or if a character is acting suspiciously, the character should know to be like, something's going on with that character. And I always expect these characters to be surprised by that, but Kendera Blake makes it so realistic and rational that they would have common sense to be like, okay, I'm going to keep an eye on this. And that doesn't take away from the brilliance of them overcoming these conflicts. It just adds to it, saying, yeah, they're smart. They aren't some kind of naive character. They actually will take the time, and they still have to have this kind of intellectual capacity to, defeat the enemy or whatever it is. So I really do love the series. I've listened to both audiobooks thus far in the series from Libby, and it's great. The voice narrator does a great job. I did end up buying both books, so now they're on my shelf so I can reread them when I want. But I highly recommend the audiobooks because they were really enjoyable. And like I said, got them from the library, didn't spend money, and brilliant. 5 stars all around. I also ended up getting these promotional copies from a publisher. I think it was Henry Holt. I should double check that. 1 second. Okay, I am a bad reviewer. It is Henry Holt, and I'm very much appreciative to Henry Holt, to Margaret Owen, to Colored Pages, Book Tours, Fierce Reads. All of them ended up kind of coming together and gifting me Little Thieves and Painted Devils. It is a YA fantasy series that also, again, leans on fairy tales. That seems to be a trend of something that I'm getting into these days. And I love this series. I gave Little Thieves 5 stars. I gave Painted Devils 4 stars. And I actually dedicated an entire video on this series as like an author spotlight where I talk more about the books, more about the author herself, Margaret Owen. And I will link it below. I'll make sure to have something on the screen maybe that directs you that way. So if you're interested in learning more about those books, I'm not going to repeat myself, but I mean, 5 stars, 4 stars. Clearly I enjoyed them. And if you want to learn more about them, definitely check out that video. What else? Did I read anything else? I definitely did. I also ended up reading, this was the last book that I finished this month. I think Painted Devils was the last book I finished, but Practice Makes Perfect is another one that kind of ended the month for me. And that's by Sarah Adams. It's a contemporary romance. I listened to that on audiobook, and multiple times I thought about stopping reading. Actually, I ended up giving this book 2 stars just because I think it's a bit too cheesy for me, too Hallmark, but with spice, which is always very confusing to read. I think I wanted one or the other, and this was just too sugary for me. I think I had high hopes for it because before I even really read romance too often, the first romance that I did read, and it was also the first audiobook I ever listened to, was actually The Cheat Code by Sarah Adams, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that was really fun. I gave that one 4 stars. And so I've tried to read Sarah Adams again since then, and it just has never really worked out. There was another book that I tried by her that I ended up DNFing because I just couldn't get through it. And so with this book, Practice Makes Perfect, I did end up finishing it just because it's something, listening, there wasn't anything else I was listening to, so I was like, I might as well just keep listening to it, and it was fine, but I do think it was too cheesy. Sometimes with contemporary romances, what happens is a character's personality is so dependent on one activity, one career, one, I guess, descriptive adjective, and that's just their entire personality, and it just becomes way too much for me to be able to cope with this 2-dimensional character. And I really do think that they're 2-dimensional, whereas I want someone who's 3-dimensional. In comparison, The Wedding Season, 3-dimensional characters, they were so vibrant, and just I could fully see them as real human beings, whereas with Practice Makes Perfect, they just were too archetypal. We have the kind of very sweet, innocent main character heroine who has apparently no experience with relationships, and she wants to practice becoming better at dating, because the one thing she wants to do, she's like, I've got everything. I've got a career, I've got family. The next step is get married. I want to get married, which is such an unhealthy perspective of being like, let's check this off the list. The next thing I need to do is get a ring on my finger. I want to get married. And it's like, no, girl, you don't need to get married to have a full life. That's the thing that is like, I think if we take one thing away from this video that I've talked about with the wedding season and with Practice Makes Perfect, is how annoying it is that a character feels like they need to do that. Like, I need to get married. I need to have babies. Like, this is the next thing I need to do. My life is incomplete without it. And it's just like, yeah, I guess you can want those things. But I just think it's sad when you feel like that's what you have to do just to check something off a list. And so that's basically kind of like what she does. She's like, I need to practice with someone so that I can eventually snag a husband. So that's basically what that book is about. And she finds her practice partner in this bodyguard for her brother's fiance, because she's this like famous artist. And that comes from book 1, When in Rome, apparently, which I didn't even realize this was a series. And so just a bit of messiness. And he's like this tattooed bodyguard who, like, you know, he doesn't do relationships. And it's just like, okay, I don't know. I found it very silly. I did finish the book. I gave it 2 stars. Do I regret reading it? I guess not. I think I would have regret physically reading it, but the audiobook was fine. And that's why I gave it 2 stars, because there's just too much chaos. I will not be continuing the series, I'll tell you that much. Anyway, that's the end. That's the end of my reviews. I suppose for a little bit of statistics, we can look at, I think I ended up giving it like 3.8 rating for the month in general, which is really exciting. I read 3 YAs, the rest were adult. The one thing that surprises me is because I do typically read mysteries, I didn't read one mystery this month, which is really fascinating. I am currently reading a mystery. It's called Obelisks at Sea by C. Daly King. It's a golden age American detective fiction mystery that's set on a transatlantic cruise, which I actually am really enjoying it. It's really humorous and really interesting. I got it through my Mysterious Bookshop subscription service for this month, and yeah, I'm enjoying that so far, about halfway through that. I'm also reading Viviana Valentine Gets Her Man, which is a historical fiction mystery. The reason why I'm reading this book is because I actually got the second book, which just recently came out, on NetGalley as a NetGalley e-arc, and I wanted to start the series from the beginning, and I'm enjoying it so much. I'm listening to the audiobook for book 1 through Libby, and it is really enjoyable. The voice narrator is doing a great job. It's follows this girl from Brooklyn. She's got this Brooklyn accent, and she's going across the city she's working for this PI. She's his secretary. He goes missing. There's just all this chaos, and I'm really having fun with it. It's very much His Girl Friday kind of meets The Marvelous Miss Maisel. Is that what that series is called on Amazon Prime? That's just the vibe I'm getting. It's really fun. It's really action-packed. 1950s New York City sass is what I'm kind of going to describe it as. So yeah, really fun. Those are the 2 mysteries that I'm currently reading, but I didn't finish either of them in May. And so it's a May of no mystery, which is really surprising to me. In addition to the fact that I didn't read any books that I actually own. What is going on? Anyway, so I'm looking forward to June. I'm really excited about it. I've got a few things planned. So obviously Friday I am going to be doing reading sprints for Scarred. Probably won't be reading that book, but I'll be doing others on Brooklyn Reads channel. So go check out Brooklyn for that. I am also participating in a 24-hour reading event with Neva from Reading When Neva. We are going to be doing like 4 hours on 6 different channels, which is really exciting. I'm the last leg on that Saturday, and I already can't remember the dates for that. What is going on? I am just such a mess. I want to say it's like, I'll put the dates down here because I literally can't remember it. I'm the worst person ever. I'm also doing a fun reading sprints plan with Carly from Bookish Pixie Reads, the person that I read the wedding season with. We're doing that on the 9th of June. So that's next Friday, which is really exciting. Did I get the date right? The 8th or the 9th? Oh my gosh, why am I the worst? I'll put that down here too. So really exciting events are happening, lots of reading sprints. So if you're interested and you got to the end of the video, maybe you should subscribe to me now if you haven't already, because reading sprints are really fun. You get to meet a lot of people, and everyone who participates in them is just so kind and so supportive, and it's honestly been my favorite aspect of booktube thus far, if I'm going to be completely honest. I think that's it. So yeah, if you're interested in following me, please subscribe. If you're a booktuber, say hi so that I can check out your content as well. Like the video, comment what you read in May. Did you read anything that I read? Are you reading anything interesting in June like I am? Because I'm really excited about what's happening in June as well. Okay, that's it. I will talk to you guys in the next one. Okay, bye!